There comes a moment when exhaustion stops feeling temporary and starts feeling personal. You begin to wonder whether this is just another bad phase, another season of delay, another stretch of life where things simply refuse to move. You try to stay positive. You tell yourself to be patient. You look around and see others advancing, expanding, receiving, and somewhere inside you a quiet voice whispers, maybe something is wrong with me. But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if this is not a bad phase at all? What if what you are experiencing is not punishment, not failure, not cosmic silence, but misalignment? Misalignment does not scream. It does not collapse your world overnight. It operates subtly, through repeated emotional patterns, unconscious reactions, habitual thoughts, and micro-decisions made from fear rather than trust. Over time, these patterns create a vibration of scarcity, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. Scarcity becomes the lens through which you interpret opportunities, relationships, time, and even your own worth. And the most dangerous part is that it feels normal. It feels justified. It feels like reality. Prosperity, in its deepest sense, is not merely the accumulation of money or achievements. It is coherence. It is the alignment between your inner state and your outer actions. When that alignment breaks, effort increases while results shrink. You work harder but feel emptier. You strive more but receive less satisfaction. This is not because the universe is withholding from you. It is because your internal frequency is broadcasting urgency, doubt, and self-protection instead of stability, trust, and grounded expectation. Today, we begin correcting that signal, not through forced positivity, not through denial, but through awareness, emotional recalibration, and simple, consistent habits that shift your vibration from scarcity to sustainable prosperity. Not a bad phase, but misalignment. The first sign that something is misaligned rarely appears as catastrophe. It shows up as tension, a subtle tightness in your chest when you think about money, a restless urgency when you wake up, an invisible pressure that whispers you are behind, that time is running out, that you must hurry or you will lose your chance. These sensations are often mistaken for motivation, yet they are rooted in scarcity. And when scarcity becomes the emotional baseline, every decision begins to orbit around avoidance rather than expansion. Scarcity is not simply the absence of resources. It is a state of nervous system activation. When your body operates from perceived threat, even subtle threat, it prioritizes protection over growth. You begin to choose what feels safe instead of what feels aligned. You delay bold conversations. You underprice your value. You say yes when you mean no because losing approval feels more dangerous than losing authenticity. Gradually, this pattern shapes your external results, not because you lack talent or intelligence, but because your internal frequency is calibrated toward defense. What makes misalignment so deceptive is that it often disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you are being realistic. You believe you are simply preparing for worst-case scenarios. You call it caution. Yet beneath that layer is a deeper emotional script. There isn't enough, not enough time, not enough opportunity, not enough support, and most painfully, not enough worthiness. This script runs quietly in the background, influencing the tone of your voice, the posture of your body, and the way you interpret neutral events as negative signals. Attention plays a critical role in maintaining this vibration. When you expect scarcity, your mind begins scanning for evidence that confirms it. A delayed payment becomes proof that abundance is unstable. A rejection becomes confirmation that success is reserved for others. A small setback becomes a symbol of permanent limitation. Over time, your perception narrows. You stop noticing possibilities because your focus is trained on problems. The world has not necessarily changed, but your internal filter has. There is also an emotional rhythm to misalignment. It often moves in cycles, hope followed by doubt, effort followed by frustration, brief relief followed by renewed anxiety. This pattern creates exhaustion. You begin to feel that no matter how much you try, the outcome remains the same. But the pattern persists, not because effort is insufficient, but because the emotional foundation underneath the effort has not shifted. Action taken from fear carries a different energetic quality than action taken from grounded confidence. Another subtle sign appears in comparison. When you are aligned, another person's success can inspire you. When you are misaligned, it triggers contraction. You measure your progress against timelines that were never yours. You interpret someone else's expansion as evidence of your delay. This internal contraction reinforces scarcity, tightening your sense of possibility and shrinking your perceived options. Misalignment also affects how you receive. Compliments feel uncomfortable. Opportunities feel suspicious. Support feels conditional. You may even push away potential growth because it challenges the identity you have unconsciously built around struggle. If you have been identifying as the one who is always striving, always proving, always fighting to stay afloat, prosperity can feel unfamiliar. And what feels unfamiliar often feels unsafe. Understanding this dynamic changes everything. When you recognize that what you are experiencing is not a curse but a calibration issue, the narrative softens. You are not broken, you are not unlucky, you are operating from a frequency shaped by repeated emotional patterns, and frequencies can be adjusted, not through force but through awareness, not overnight but through consistency. The moment you identify misalignment, you create the possibility of realignment, and that possibility is the beginning of prosperity. The invisible negotiation with anxiety. There is a subtle transaction that happens within the mind of someone who desires prosperity, yet feels trapped in scarcity. It is not loud or dramatic. It unfolds quietly, beneath conscious awareness, in the space between intention and emotion. You may set ambitious goals, visualize expansive outcomes, and speak confidently about the future. Yet underneath those declarations, there is an undercurrent of tension. That tension is anxiety, and when it remains unexamined, it becomes the silent negotiator shaping your results. Anxiety often disguises itself as ambition. It pushes you to work harder, to plan more, to anticipate every possible outcome. On the surface, this looks productive, but beneath the movement is a deep need for control. When you attempt to manifest prosperity from a state of anxiety, the underlying message being transmitted is not trust, but urgency. It is the emotional signal of, I must secure this now because it might disappear. And urgency rooted in fear reinforces the vibration of scarcity. This creates a dissonance between what you consciously desire and what you unconsciously expect. You say you want expansion, but emotionally you prepare for loss. You affirm abundance, but internally you brace for disappointment. This internal contradiction generates friction. You may experience bursts of motivation followed by sudden fatigue, moments of clarity followed by waves of doubt. It is not inconsistency of character. It is the collision between hope and self-protection. Self-protection is not inherently negative. It is a survival mechanism. The problem arises when protection becomes the dominant identity. If past experiences have conditioned you to associate success with pressure, visibility with criticism, or wealth with instability, your nervous system may interpret prosperity as a threat. In that state, anxiety becomes a gatekeeper. It monitors every step forward, questioning whether expansion is truly safe. This internal monitoring influences decision-making in subtle ways. You may hesitate at the moment of opportunity. You may reduce your price before anyone questions it. You may delay launching an idea until conditions feel perfect. These adjustments feel rational in the moment, yet they are often attempts to reduce internal discomfort rather than align with genuine confidence. Anxiety negotiates on your behalf, and its priority is safety, not prosperity. Another dimension of this negotiation appears in the need for immediate reassurance. When results do not materialize quickly, anxiety interprets the delay as evidence of failure. You begin to doubt the process, switching strategies frequently, seeking new methods, chasing novelty. This constant shifting prevents the stability required for momentum. Prosperity thrives in consistency, but anxiety prefers immediate relief, and relief is rarely the same as alignment. There is also a physiological component to this pattern. When the body remains in a mild state of stress, attention narrows, creativity diminishes, intuition becomes harder to access. You may believe you are thinking strategically, yet your cognitive bandwidth is partially occupied by background worry. This reduces your capacity to perceive subtle opportunities or make bold, grounded decisions. Scarcity becomes not only a belief, but a felt state. Recognizing this invisible negotiation alters the narrative. The challenge is not a lack of effort, nor a deficiency of talent. It is the emotional frequency from which effort originates. When action is driven by anxiety, it carries contraction. When action emerges from steadiness, it carries expansion. The difference is not visible in the surface behavior, but in the internal posture. As awareness deepens, the relationship with anxiety can shift. Instead of allowing it to dictate direction, it becomes information. It signals where fear has replaced trust, where urgency has replaced coherence. And in that awareness lies the possibility of recalibration. Prosperity does not require the absence of fear. It requires that fear no longer defines the frequency from which you operate. Constancy creates coherence. Prosperity rarely collapses because of one dramatic mistake. More often, it dissolves quietly through inconsistency. Not the inconsistency of effort alone, but the inconsistency of emotional posture. One day you feel aligned, confident, expansive. The next day you retreat into doubt, comparison, or subtle resentment. This oscillation fragments your frequency. And when your internal state fluctuates constantly, your external reality struggles to stabilize. Constancy is frequently misunderstood as rigid discipline. It is imagined as forcing yourself to repeat behaviors through sheer willpower, regardless of emotional state. But true constancy is not forceful. It is coherent. It emerges when your thoughts, emotions, and small daily actions begin to align around a stable identity. Prosperity does not require intensity. It requires repetition grounded in clarity. When misalignment dominates, spiritual practices can become performative. You may meditate in the morning, yet spend the afternoon immersed in stress. You may journal about gratitude, yet react to minor inconveniences as confirmation of lack. This does not mean you are incapable of transformation. It means the emotional baseline beneath your rituals has not yet shifted. Without coherence, practices become isolated moments rather than integrated states. Coherence develops in small, consistent recalibrations. It is found in the pause before reacting defensively. It appears in the decision to interpret a delay as redirection rather than rejection. It strengthens when you return again and again to a steadier emotional frequency instead of indulging catastrophic narratives. These micro-adjustments seem insignificant in isolation, yet over time they rewire your internal landscape. There is a profound difference between forcing positivity and cultivating stability. Forced positivity suppresses discomfort and creates internal pressure. Stability acknowledges discomfort without surrendering identity to it. In a stable state, you can experience uncertainty without collapsing into scarcity. You can face a temporary setback without redefining yourself as unsuccessful. This emotional resilience is the soil in which prosperity grows. Habits serve as anchors for this stability, not elaborate routines, but simple, repeatable gestures that signal alignment. A morning moment of intentional focus that centers your priorities. A midday recalibration that softens tension before it compounds. An evening reflection that integrates lessons without self-punishment. These anchors create rhythm, and rhythm generates predictability within your nervous system. When the nervous system feels predictable safety, expansion becomes less threatening. You no longer interpret growth as destabilizing. Opportunities are received with curiosity instead of suspicion. Support is welcomed instead of deflected. The internal dialogue shifts from "Can I sustain this?" to "I am building the capacity to hold more." That shift is subtle, yet transformative. Constancy also reshapes identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who occasionally aligns, you begin to see yourself as someone who returns. The return matters more than perfection. Every time you recalibrate after contraction, you reinforce a new self-concept. You are no longer the person trapped in cycles of scarcity. You are the person capable of realignment. This steady repetition alters perception. You begin noticing openings where you once saw obstacles. Conversations feel less charged. Decisions feel less desperate. The external world may not change overnight, but your relationship to it softens. And in that softened state, creativity and discernment re-emerge. Prosperity is not sustained by intensity. It is sustained by coherence maintained over time. When your emotional tone becomes more stable than your temporary circumstances, you stop reacting to every fluctuation as a threat. You begin building from grounded presence instead of restless urgency. And from that grounded presence, expansion feels natural rather than forced. Identity sustains the frequency. Long-term prosperity is less about what you achieve and more about who you become while pursuing it. Results fluctuate, markets shift, opportunities appear and disappear, but identity stabilizes frequency. If your self-concept remains rooted in struggle, no external gain will feel secure. You may experience temporary expansion, yet internally you will brace for collapse. In that bracing, you unconsciously recreate the conditions that confirm your old narrative. Identity operates quietly. It shapes the standards you tolerate, the risks you consider reasonable, and the opportunities you believe are for someone like you. When you identify as someone who is always catching up, you interpret every milestone as insufficient. When you identify as someone who must work twice as hard to deserve half as much, you normalize exhaustion. These identities feel factual because they have been rehearsed for years, reinforced by experience and repetition. Prosperity challenges identity before it alters circumstances. To hold more, you must perceive yourself as capable of holding more. This does not require arrogance or denial of past struggles. It requires integration. Instead of defining yourself by previous limitations, you begin recognizing them as chapters rather than conclusions. The nervous system gradually learns that expansion does not erase who you were, it evolves who you are. There is also a neurological dimension to this evolution. The brain favors familiarity. It rewards predictable patterns even when they are uncomfortable. If you are accustomed to urgency, calm may initially feel foreign. If you are used to financial instability, stability can feel suspicious. The mind may scan for threats even in positive change. This is not sabotage in the dramatic sense, it is adaptation to what has been known. Because of this, prosperity requires the capacity to remain steady in unfamiliar territory. When results begin improving, old doubts may surface with surprising intensity. Thoughts such as "this won't last" or "something will go wrong" can arise spontaneously. These thoughts are echoes of previous conditioning. If they are believed without question, they subtly influence behavior. You might withdraw slightly. You might overwork to prevent imagined loss. You might hesitate to fully enjoy progress. Sustaining a new frequency involves tolerating the discomfort of expansion. It involves allowing success to exist without immediately bracing for decline. This emotional tolerance strengthens through repetition. Each time you experience growth and remain grounded, you teach your nervous system that prosperity is safe. Each time you choose presence over panic, you reinforce a new internal baseline. Environment also shapes identity. The conversations you engage in, the narratives you consume, and the standards you observe influence what feels normal. When scarcity dominates your surroundings, prosperity feels exceptional and fragile. When growth and responsibility coexist in your environment, expansion feels attainable and sustainable. Identity is porous. It absorbs cues from context. Another layer of identity relates to self-permission. Many people unconsciously link prosperity to guilt. If others in their family struggled, surpassing that baseline can feel like betrayal. If they were praised for sacrifice, ease can feel undeserved. These emotional associations bind prosperity to tension. Until they are acknowledged, expansion may trigger inner conflict. Gradually, a new identity forms through consistent alignment. You begin to see yourself as someone who manages resources wisely, who handles opportunity with steadiness, who navigates setbacks without collapsing. This perception is not inflated optimism. It is evidence-based confidence built through lived experience. The more you embody this identity, the less you need external validation to confirm it. Frequency stabilizes when identity stabilizes. You no longer chase prosperity as something outside yourself. You recognize it as a natural extension of who you are becoming. And in that recognition, growth feels less like a gamble and more like a continuation. Alignment is the return to yourself. What you once labeled as a bad phase was never a verdict over your life. It was feedback, a quiet indication that your internal frequency had drifted from the reality you desire to experience. Scarcity was not your destiny, it was a pattern. Misalignment was not punishment, it was information. And information, when recognized, becomes power. Prosperity does not arrive as a sudden miracle detached from who you are. It unfolds as a natural consequence of coherence. When your emotional baseline stabilizes, when anxiety no longer dictates your decisions, when constancy replaces intensity, and when your identity expands beyond struggle, the external world begins to mirror that internal shift, not because reality is magical, but because perception, behavior, and opportunity begin operating in harmony. You were never lacking potential. You were navigating from a frequency shaped by repetition. Now you understand that frequency can be recalibrated, that habits, when practiced with awareness, reshape identity, that identity, when expanded, sustains growth, and that growth, when grounded in coherence, becomes sustainable prosperity. This is not about chasing abundance, it is about becoming aligned enough to receive it without fear. The return to alignment is not dramatic. It is deliberate, it is steady, it is daily, and it is entirely within your capacity. If misalignment was never your identity, then who are you becoming now that you recognize your power to recalibrate? Take a moment and reflect on that question honestly. The version of you that sustains prosperity is already forming through awareness and constancy. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel to continue deepening your alignment and understanding the mechanics of true expansion. There is more waiting for you beyond this moment. Continue watching the video suggested on your screen, because the next step in your evolution may be closer than you think.